Well, let's talk about inflation just for a minute because it seems to be one of the big financial news topics, uh, certainly now and over the last few months. And I'm curious, just your general take on the Fed's response, and then and kind of related to that is, as investors, even passive index fund investors, should we care? I mean, in terms of changes to our portfolio, or should we just largely ignore it?
Well, I, I think that you should definitely should care because it represents the real purchasing power. So, I mean, you can look at, let's take a look at the 1930s, which was such a horrible time for stocks. It was actually a little bit less horrible because you had deflation for part of that period. So the actual purchasing power of your stock portfolio, it's a small consolation because stocks fell, almost 90% from peak to trough, but went up. And if you look at the 1970s, which were a bad but not nearly as catastrophic time for stocks, your purchasing power declined significantly during the 1970s. So basically, the Dow from 1966 to 1982 was unchanged, but it was worth maybe 60% of what it was at the beginning of that period in real purchasing power, not including the dividends that you received. So inflation definitely does affect you, and that's why you invest. You invest so that you can defer compensation today and then have buying power tomorrow, have savings tomorrow. So how do you react to it? I think stocks actually, despite the 1970s being such a bad time, stocks actually are a pretty decent inflation hedge if you think about it, because companies borrow money, and those borrowings are eroded by inflation. Companies sell things, companies that are able to change prices quickly. Let's say consumer goods companies, supermarkets, people like that. Anyone in the in the commodity space, in the natural resources space, can reprice and can pass on those price increases and can insulate you somewhat from inflation. Not that inflation is a good thing, but they provide a bit of a hedge. So you see people going out and buying gold or buying Bitcoin or whatever because it's a hedge against inflation. Well, I think that stocks in the long run will be the best hedge against inflation. Doesn't mean that they'll preserve your purchasing power, but they'll preserve it, more than buying a rock or buying an entry on the blockchain.